Quick question. How well do you think your last conversation went? I bet you think, oh, it went great. I told them what needs to be done. I listed out all the to-dos, and the conversation was great. It went great. What if I tell you maybe it didn't? A number of us tend to believe that because we've said something to people means that the conversation was great, means that we're great at conversation and we're great conversationalists. I think that's the word. But it's not always the case, because you've said something to somebody does not mean that you've communicated anything to them. Communication is totally different from comprehension. You can say something to me, but if I don't understand it, if I can't comprehend what you're saying to me, that conversation cannot be classed as having gone well. The whole point of having a conversation with somebody is to communicate an idea, a thought, a process, and make sure that the other person understands that and is on board with you. So if you have a conversation with somebody and you just have the conversation, which means you spoke, you used a host of different words, but they're not understanding what you said. They don't know what the next step is to take. They don't know what you're exactly asking them to do. They don't know, for example, you're in a relationship and you know how they keep saying you have to communicate your needs. You have to communicate your needs. You can communicate your needs, right? If the person cannot comprehend what you're saying, they don't understand it, they can't even begin to put it together and process it, you cannot class that conversation as having gone well. What I want to bring your attention to this week as we start a new one is, the conversations that you're having. Are you just having conversations? Are you communicating such that the other person can comprehend what you're talking about? If they don't understand, this is really interesting because I remember my mentor used to say to me a lot of times, especially when I started going online, right after my certifications and stuff, I struggled to find a way to really communicate the ideas, to really bring my points to my conversations to the point where the person I'm having that conversation with can comprehend what I'm talking about. He used to say to me, if you're fond of using big words, if you're fond of using analogies and stuff, you have to bring it to a point where the person you're talking to is, they have comprehension. How are you going to know when the person you're talking to is starting to comprehend what you're talking about? Body cues, body language. Sometimes they don't need to speak it, sometimes they don't need to say it. But when you're having conversation with somebody and they're going, okay, or the body language is changing, they're sort of relaxing into it, they're leaning towards you a little bit more, kind of like I'm doing. Things like that will let you know if there's comprehension, if they are starting to pick on what you're saying. It's the same thing with whether you are trying to preach the word of God, whether you're trying to teach mathematics. Communication is a great skill, right? But it's one that needs to be honed in, one that needs to be practiced. I'm not the best at it, not even right now. It's a work in progress, as with everything in life. But as you start your week, have at the back of your mind that because you are speaking, because you're having a conversation, does not mean that the person has comprehension. And communication is not exactly the same thing as comprehension. You can talk all you want. The person might not understand, the person might not have comprehension. You want to make sure that your conversations, your communication with people gets to the point where there is comprehension. If you're having conversation and the person you're having this conversation with cannot comprehend what you're talking about, you're just having conversation, you're just basically speaking, using words. You have to try to have at the back of your mind ways that you can make sure that the person that you're talking to has comprehension, and that means that may include you figuring out how to talk to them in a language that they understand. When I say language, I don't mean language, English language, French, Yoruba, Hausa. I mean in a manner that they will understand. You bring it to the level that they can comprehend. That's in no way to say anyone is like unintelligent or anything, but even if you're talking to a CEO, right, and you're having conversation and you're just going yeah, you have to make sure that you're talking to them at a level where they will have comprehension. They'll be able to even figure out what you're talking about in the first place. If I studied chemical engineering and I'm talking to somebody maybe in the medical field and I'm having a conversation with them about a process and I'm throwing all these chemical engineering facts and terminologies and stuff, they're going to be like, I mean, okay. I remember just last week I was talking to my partner. We were talking about sewing. I'm a fashion designer, right? And he was asking me a couple of things. I said, oh, I went to get sewing notions. Like, what? And so I was like, sewing notions, like, what? So I said, oh, I'm sorry, I went to get these one, I want to get thread, I want to get kidney, because he was not familiar with the term notions when it came to sewing, and so he's not in the fashion industry. He said the people that he'd interacted, with when it came to fashion, he'd never heard anyone use the word notion. He knows the English word notion, but not in that regard, not when it came to fashion designing and making clothes and what that entailed. So I had to break it down. And I thought, oh, okay, communication and comprehension, they're totally different, right? And it can lead to frustration, right? It's just incredible, because we tend to think because we've said something to somebody, I've said it, I communicated with you, I've said it, and that's it. You find that when you communicate with someone, imagine in your relationship and you're trying to tell your partner, this is what I want, this is what I need. You've said it to them, you've communicated it. If they cannot comprehend what that entails, if they cannot figure out what that truly really means for you, you've just said stuff. And you are still going to be frustrated, you're still going to be angry, you're still going to start feeling that bitterness and everything, because you would possibly start to feel like were you not listening to me? Did you not hear what I said? I told you this, I told you that. They heard you. There's every chance that they heard you, but they didn't comprehend what that entailed. They couldn't fathom what you were talking about. So communication is great. Learning to communicate and having conversation, communicate your feelings, communicate your processes, communicate whatever you need to communicate, especially if you're a manifestor. And your strategy first and foremost is to communicate. Communication is great, but how are you going to make sure that within that there's also comprehension? The person you're talking to can comprehend what you're talking about. Communication is great and all of that, but if you keep talking and they don't understand what you're saying, you're just talking. That literally is what you are doing. You're simply just talking. You have to make sure that the person that you're having that conversation with, the person that you're communicating with, hi, thank you for joining, Olori. The person that you're having conversation with has comprehension. They can sort of, put together what you're trying to tell them. They can maybe see it in the mind's eye. They can feel it out. It depends. Comprehension is different for everybody. You will know if the person you're having a conversation with starting to comprehend, because you can pick up on the body languages, eye movements, maybe breathing, literally like the way the body is reacting to you. If you're talking to somebody and they're just stiff and looking at you like you have 7 heads, there's no comprehension there. Or possibly they're just not even in that same zone with you at that point. They're standing in front of you, but it's coming in here and going out there. So communication is great and everything, but make sure that you have at the back of your mind, how can I communicate my idea to the point where the other party has comprehension, they understand what I'm talking about. This is a new week, and part of the things that most likely stress people out is just feeling like, didn't you hear me? Didn't you hear when I said that? Weren't you listening? I said this to you, I gave you this set of instructions. It's possible that they heard you, but they couldn't comprehend what you were talking about. So they just like, okay, so whatever you need to say, once you're gone, they're like, don't know what to do now. So have that at the back of your mind as you go along with your activities this week, and remember to make it a great week. You have all the control. There's no need to sit there and wait. You can make it a great week. So make that happen. Thank you for listening. I have to run now. I shall see you as the day goes by. Namaste.